When I went to prison at 16 years old, I wasn't expecting there to be any future at all, let alone a good or a bad one. But the fact is, the stuff that I did in prison is the most powerful stuff on my resume to date. Everything that I have today was because the older guys in the prison made me go to school.
Sean is proof positive that people can change their life. I have my bachelor's in behavioral science. When I first got it, it was to study myself. I chose the street life, and I couldn't understand why I did a lot of the things I did. I was a dangerous person, and I believe if I can change, anybody can change.
Hello, I'm Brent Glass, Executive Director of the Sing Sing Prison Museum in Ossining, New York, and very delighted to be welcoming you to this oral history interview with Sean Pica. The Sing Sing Prison Museum is under development now for the last several years, but we have some great plans for the future. The mission of the museum is to tell the story of 200 years of incarceration at Sing Sing Prison, one of America's most iconic and most famous prisons. And it's also to challenge visitors and our audience to imagine a more equitable criminal justice system and take action to build a better society. And one of the ways that the change that is occurring in criminal justice today and in the past several years is the encouragement of education in prison, and especially opportunities for higher education. And we're very fortunate today to have one of the nation's leaders in that movement, Sean Pica, who is the executive director of Hudson Link for Higher Education in Prison, also a board member of the Sing Sing Prison Museum. So, Sean, I'd like to start off by asking you to describe your personal experience in acquiring an education and higher education in prison.
Thank you, Brent. I am blown away every time I have this conversation. And I will just remind you too, when you and I first talked about me possibly joining the board, I was super excited that your discussions or your vision of what this museum would entail would have a component, not just of higher ed and this work that's happening, but also incorporating the voices of folks like me that actually live there. And that leads me right into my educational journey. When I was arrested, I was sentenced to 24 years in prison. I was only in the 9th grade, so I hadn't even finished high school. So when I got to that first maximum security prison, back then, 16-year-olds were sentenced as adults. And I just assumed that my educational journey was over, had stopped, and was very surprised that the men in that cell block were adamant that I should finish my high school diploma. And actually, one of the first things, because I kind of pushed back to say, I'm not really school material, but the older guys were working in food service, and that meant they ate a little better and they, had some perks, lived in better parts of the cell block. So they had said to me that I couldn't work with them in the mess hall unless I had a high school diploma. So I worked really hard. I actually had to take the test twice. I struggled a little bit, but these older men worked with me and assisted me until I finally passed my high school diploma. And on graduation day, the prison did an amazing job of making it feel real. It was caps and gowns and cake, and other men from the prison were in the audience. And I remember as I said to the principal of the school, excitedly like, oh, well, now I can get a job in the mess hall. And she said, oh, well, you don't need a high school diploma to work in the mess hall. The guys had totally conned me into going to school, but it worked. And something clicked in me that day to, number one, realize it was the first thing in my life that I had accomplished. And there's a moment there to kind of reflect on, but also that maybe I could go further, because back then in the 80s, there was college in every prison in New York.
Let's talk about pursuing higher education after you received your high school degree.
I moved on from getting my high school diploma to applying for a pre-college program. It was the Junior College of Albany. And I was really excited to get through that program and actually start college work. Unfortunately, I got moved around quite a bit when I was a teenager, and I ended up living in 9 different maximum security prisons over my 16 and a half years. So every time I got moved, I would be able to start a new college program. So I went to New York Theological Seminary, Junior College of Albany, SUNY Ulster, Skidmore University, some amazing, amazing schools, Nyack College. And then I had 118 credits and no degree in 1994 when the infamous crime bill was passed. And the funding, which was Pell and TAP, of these prison college programs was pulled. And overnight, over 350 programs across the country dwindled down to about 10 programs. And I was in one of those programs, and I remember like it was yesterday, just the college taking their books back and leaving the prison, and it was just over. I was probably, I don't know, 24 or 25, and just felt like that was the hope that we had. We knew the connection between a second chance upon release and a higher education. So having that get yanked was a real blow.
So what happened to allow you to continue your education?
We literally sat around for a couple of years. And for me, I mean, my mom and dad were New York City cops. I'm one of 5 boys, but while I'm the only one that went to prison, I'm also the only one to college. So I didn't really have any to balance my college experience off with my family. And I kind of felt, well, I gave it a shot. It's over. I didn't see it as a big deal, to be honest with you. I never really assumed I'd be able to use college after I had left prison anyway, right? I wasn't making a connection there. It was the older men that had already finished their degrees that were still at Sing Sing that really pushed me to say, Sean, you're not finished. We're not finished. And they began to advocate at Sing Sing and to work to create a college program. And these men had no phone, no email, no car. I mean, it was incredible to think about like this community organizing event while they created a college program. One of the key factors in that was the superintendent, Brian Fisher, at the time, had literally walked into this room while we were brainstorming on how to create a college program. And gosh, that probably doesn't seem like a big deal, but as someone that lived in 9 different maximum security prisons, I never met a superintendent till I met Brian. Uh-huh. So to have the superintendent without a security detail walk into this room in the basement of the school area and say, hey, I don't know how to start a college, but I hear that's what you guys are brainstorming. I would love to help with the conversation. It was just 10 degrees of incredibly impressive from anybody, let alone the superintendent. And he also said, I don't know how to do it, but I would love to help figure it out. And that's a really important part of the conversation, that he didn't push his own agenda here as the superintendent, but he did say, I've been around long enough to know that when that college program left this prison, the prison culture and atmosphere, we really felt that. And if there's anything to bring back that hope, we need to do it through the vehicle of bringing college back. And it was probably 18 or 20 months of discussions before we literally figured out we were going to create a nonprofit, Hudson Link for Higher Education in Prison, and we were going to find colleges willing to partner with us to deliver that work. And the other very important piece that happened in that conversation was, I remember Brian saying to this group of 20 guys in the prison, if we can get college started, who's going to sit in the program? And I remember answering with what I thought he wanted to hear, which was, oh, the guys that have 18 months left to go home or 2 years. And he paused the group and said, if I would suggest anything, it would be maybe men that aren't going home as well. Because who else could carry on the torch or carry on this culture if everyone that goes through the program is also going home? And it was the most important piece of creating this program, that everybody was eligible. And for some of those men that went through our first graduating class, they're still not all home yet. And that was a really important part of what the culture of this program ended up being, which was each one teach one.
So Sean, were there any other religious organizations involved in creating the program?
From the very beginning, it was literally only religious programs. The local synagogues and churches, those congregations were the only ones that were brave enough to believe in supporting a program in prison. You know, we're talking about now 23 years ago, even the colleges that were willing to partner, that believed in the work, asked us not to talk about it because the college was afraid of being associated with prisoners and prison work. So we have come so far to, you know, this last, with Obama and his administration actually creating a pilot program to bring Pell back, that then now 6 years later is now reenacted in the entire country. That was very brave. And really our governor here in New York as well, that is trying to figure out how to do more around college. They see statistically, financially, recidivism rates. I mean, this has such an impact, everybody, but it all was built on a foundation with local churches and synagogues to this day, 23 years later, they are still our foundation that believes so wholeheartedly in this work.
Just to finish on your journey, you went on to get not only your college degree, but two master's degrees. Was that while you were incarcerated or after you came home?
I was very lucky to have a group of men that pushed me to get my high school diploma as a teenager when I first got there. So after I got my high school diploma, I went through a pre-college component. I then went to college. I received my 1-year certificate in rec leadership from Ulster County Community College, my 2-year and 4-year degree from Nyack College. I got my Master's of Professional Studies from New York Theological Seminary. And then upon release, I got my Master's in Social Work from Hunter College, and I'm currently working on my MBA.
Those degrees are piling up.
I'm keeping busy.
Let's talk a little bit about Hudson Link for higher education in prison. As soon as you came home, did you start working with Hudson Link?
I remember like it was yesterday, graduating with my bachelor's degree from Hudson Link. And again, the prison was incredible with caps and gowns and cake, and there was a 4-piece quintet that, you know, played at the graduation, and guests and family members were invited. All these things that were so innovative in a maximum security prison. But while I was sitting there with my family and feeling super proud, the president of the college, the president of New York Theological Seminary, the current commissioner, and the superintendent of the prison were walking around greeting families, thanking the families, because listen, we don't do this on our own. Incarcerated men and women need family support to make these programs work. And as they're walking around thanking folks and congratulating folks and thanking families, the president of the seminary pulled me on the side and said, hey, we have 12 students annually that launch with this intensive 1-year graduate program. One of those men was unable to start because of a medical situation. You have your bachelor's degree, classes start on Monday. And I remember saying, well, actually, I would love to take a little time off. Kind of, you know, I've been in classes now for 2.5 years. And my mother kicked me under the table and turned to the president and said, oh, no, yeah, Monday's perfect. He'll be there. Don't worry. And it was a life-changing event for me. And I will also say that the bachelor's degree and the graduate degree that I received inside was so much more work, harder academically. My fellow students demanded more, the professors demanded, and when I got home and applied to the graduate program at Hunter, I was so worried because everything in my head was telling me that what you got inside is not going to be the same as what's outside. And let's face it, none of us wants to look like a dummy in that classroom. So walking into that classroom at Hunter and launching that program, I was afraid. I was really afraid. And to think about someone that lived in 9 maximum security prisons over nearly 2 decades, being afraid to walk into a classroom, it really speaks to what all of us go through when we walk into an academic setting. Yeah. But I went through that 2-year full-time program, and then the president of the college asked me to be the keynote speaker at my own graduation. It it proved in so many ways that what we were doing on the inside was real. But it also gave me the ability to go back to those men and women and let them know this is real. Look what's happening here. Take this seriously and let's grow it, which we did.
Describe right now, at this moment, what Hudson Link is all about. How many students are in the program now? How many facilities are being served?
We have just grown every single year for the past 23 years. And when I took over, we were at the 10-year mark. We were just serving our 10-year anniversary. There were 66 students, one facility at Sing Sing, one college partner, and that was it. We had about a $280,000 budget. We received no state or federal funding. So now over the past 13 years, we've grown it to 5 sites. Every single site offers pre-college, 2-year and 4-year programming. We have 11 college partners. We have a $2.6 million budget that we still raise privately. There's no state or federal funding for this. 2 award-winning documentaries on PBS and HBO, 17 staff members, 17 of which are formerly incarcerated. It's the only degree-granting program in a prison in the country that's run and staffed by formerly incarcerated people. So I am super excited. We have 680 students in the 5 sites. We have grown so much, but I'm just super proud of where we've come from and what we're doing now. And we are doing as much with the reentry field as we are with the college work. And now we're doing a construction initiative in the prison and out of the prison as well.
Can you briefly describe the construction program for housing? Because I think that's very significant, because obviously when someone comes home, if they don't have a place to live, that's a big adjustment.
So I am super excited about this next endeavor we've picked up. About 2 years ago, we launched a construction initiative called New Beginnings, and it takes our students upon release and partners them with local contractors to renovate abandoned homes. And this will then create housing for our other returning students. In some respects, the thing that I was surprised about in all this, it really connected the students on the outside with the students on the inside, as both were really working together to have this goal of safe housing. What we do know about recidivism rates and about reentry work is that the single biggest indicator to a successful transition upon release is a safe bed. And if 68% of the men and women in this country are returning to prison in the first 3 years, we need to do everything possible, whether it's college or housing or reentry clothing, to give them a fighting chance to be successful.
Let's talk about this new legislation that has just passed, I guess at the end of 2020. Is it a game changer for the field?
For most of us that are already in the field of higher ed and prison work, it's a little scary. And I only say that because there will be folks that will jump into this work only because they now can get paid for it. And the irony is every one of our college partners that's gotten into this with us over the past 23 years did it at their own expense. So the kind of dedication for a university to put their name on something and their resources behind it means they really believe in it. Whereas now someone could get involved because there's an opportunity to make money off it. And we want to really be careful that there's a balance there. And one of the things that we've done, I co-founded the Alliance for Higher Education in Prison, which is a national organization that will assist newer programs as they launch. And let's face it, all we could do is give them the tools that of programs like ours that are 20 years old, what works, what doesn't work, what the landscape could feel like and look like, what some of our visions of what the future could be, and let them build off of that. I know for me, I was involved with the very first discussions of building Hudson Link 23 years ago. I would have loved to have had a conversation like that with somebody that was already doing the work, because we made a lot of mistakes and we were also very lucky. Some of our most successful programs I made in the dark. So while I'm very proud of the decisions that we made and that they worked, I didn't. Maybe we were shooting from the hip here.
This new legislation provides funding for higher education, so restores the Pell Grants, or is it a different kind of funding?
Yeah, so the new legislation that's being enacted now would build off the Pell pilot program that President Obama created 6 years ago. And it's the in-prison college programs could now utilize Pell funding throughout the country, so that these students that essentially would have been eligible for Pell funding prior to prison are now eligible inside as well. And it's not a lot of money. It's only about $5,000 per student per year. So it's not this huge windfall of funds, but it is enough to give these small nonprofits a chance to deliver this work, and not lose money either. So it's an exciting. It's probably going to be enacted in the fall of 2023, which is right around the corner for us. And for those of us that are already in the field, we're doing everything possible to get policies and resources and our playbooks out to these newer programs so that they can reach out to us if they would like assistance in building theirs.
This subject of higher education and prison seems to be nonpartisan at this point. Do you find that that's, or bipartisan? Has that been your experience?
I think in the very beginning it wasn't, but what folks are realizing was that this get tough on crime stance in the early 90s, we're now in fact paying for it now. And what I mean is that the prison population grew to such an extreme, the number of prisons, the overall population in the country, it was bankrupting our country. And when we look at some of these other countries like Norway that have incredible results and much smaller budgets, we had to open our eyes and realize our get tough on crime stance it cost us a ton of money and it didn't work, and we're all admitting it now. So education is one of the key components that we're seeing lower recidivism rates, as well as a few other pieces about the reentry. I mean, we need to treat our men and women that are incarcerated like they're human beings, which sounds like a very simple first step, because when they return, at some point, 95% of these men will return to our communities. If they return after being away for 2 decades and they don't feel human, they're not going to feel human in our communities. They're not going to be able to give back in a way that we need them to. So this is a very simple first step of treating folks like they're human and educating them, because a higher education is going to level the playing field.
Put you on the spot a little here. You're a great example of what an education can do to change a person's life. Can you think of one or two other men or women that, and I know you're proud of everyone, but a great story that you can think of that would offer people watching this some inspiration?
We did a national search for a new position here about 18 months ago as a development role. And we had resumes from all over the country. And the two top folks that we had to choose between were two of our own students. And when I think about one of them went through our program and was released after 21 years and is now our development director and is modeling development across the country. Another one, Sean, is actually working at the Vera Institute now. He was the second runner-up in that position that he didn't get, and he's now program officer at Vera. Other folks are working. One of our students is now working at a foundation, actually doing the other side of this work, which is so exciting. Thomas has been doing incredible. And we're seeing 86% of these students get into the social services field upon release. And it's the who's who of the New York City social services scene now. It's just been incredible to see so many of these students. 99% of our students are successful upon release in 23 years. That's not a magical moment. It's literally just educating an uneducated population. That's it. And it's really been done so inexpensively. We don't charge the New York State Department of Corrections. We don't charge the colleges. We actually raise all the money privately. And then these students are successful.
I mean, this is a conversation we can go on and on. I'm really, really grateful for your taking the time. Let's talk a little bit about Hudson Link and the Sing Sing Prison Museum. What connection or what role would you hope the museum can play in supporting what you're doing? Because the museum is is not going to be providing direct services the way Hudson Link does. The museum's not going to be an advocate for policy, but we will be encouraging conversation about these issues. What do you think the museum could be doing or should be doing in the future?
You know what, Brent, when I think about the role of the museum, or really any museum, is capturing the voice of the folks we're talking about. And that's generally not done. So I have always been super excited from our conversations, as well as even the superintendent at Sing Sing, who has from the very beginning talked openly about the history that we're telling can't just be about the electric chair, can't just be about the local chain gangs. It has to also include theater and the arts, all these incredible musicians that have played on the stage at Sing Sing on Christmas Eve to uplift these men over the years. All those stories that have to be told, because that's our history. And also, I feel like the board itself has been so genuine in making sure that our conversations capture the conversations of the men that live at Sing Sing. And just for me, because my daily routine includes me going in and out of the prison, when I would talk to the men living there about our conversations, they're energized. They love the idea of capturing this history to also include the positive stuff. The year that the men did the fundraiser to buy a mobility van for the local woman that was disabled. Like, no one knows about the stuff, the good stuff that's coming out of these prisons. Let's capture that. Let's tell those stories to go alongside the stuff that happens day to day in a prison as well. And I think that that's really an important part of this. Mm-hmm. And I know that the men that live in Sing Sing are proud that their voice is being captured in this conversation.
Well, Sean, thanks so much for sharing your stories, and thanks for all the great work you're doing to build a better society. And I mean that sincerely, and it's a real privilege to work with you and to have you on our board. And thanks and good luck.
Thank you, Brent.